During the early 20th century, much of the Yaqui tribe had been captured and sold to plantations. But hard labor wasn't the only goal. Yaqui women were forced to marry Chinese men, and the reason is utterly disturbing. The Yaqui are known for having waged the most determined, enduring, and successful resistance against forced colonization. In fact, they're the only Native American tribe that has never officially surrendered to either the Spanish colonial forces, the Mexican government, or the United States. Back in the 16th century, the Yaqui tribe occupied a territory along the lower course of the Yaqui River in Sonora, Mexico. At that time, they had about 30,000 people living in 80 villages in an area that was about 60 miles long and 15 miles wide. They were a peaceful tribe who lived harmoniously with nature, using the river as their primary life source. They lived in traditional hand-built houses made of adobe clay baked into hard bricks. This incredible ancient tribe were traditionally hunter-gatherers who relied on their environment to survive. Some Yaqui lived along the mouth of the river and lived off resources from the sea. Most lived in agricultural communities, growing beans, maize, and squash on land inundated by the river every year. Others lived in the deserts and mountains. Unlike indigenous people in the north, the Yaqui didn't wear much clothing. The men wore only Native American breechcloths and sometimes leggings made of deerskin. Women wore knee-length skirts made of animal hide. They were completely self-sustained and had a harmonious relationship with nature. That is, until an unwelcome visitor showed up. In 1533, the Yaqui found themselves face-to-face with a group of foreign men. The leader of the group was Captain Diego de Guzman, a man belonging to the Spanish settlements just south of them, and he was looking for more land. The Yaqui warriors were fierce, and other tribes knew it, but they didn't often go looking for trouble. At first they assumed the outsiders simply didn't know the boundaries, and a quick conversation would clear things up. Sadly, they were wrong. Within minutes, a bloody battle ensued. The Spanish ended up retreating, but still managed to claim victory. The Yaqui suddenly lost a chunk of their land and gained a new enemy. Thus began the 40-year struggle for the Yaqui to protect their land and their culture. This may have been the Yaquis' first experience with the Spanish, but it wouldn't be their last. While the Yaqui didn't have guns, like their newfound enemy, they did have bows and arrows, and were extremely skilled at using them. In 1565, Spanish conquistador Francisco de Ibarra attempted to establish a Spanish settlement in Yaqui territory, but ultimately failed. While he lost a lot of men and maybe some pride, de Ibarra wasn't actually interested in land anyway. He was on a quest to find silver and other precious metals, none of which were often found in the Yaqui territory. So when de Ibarra lost the first two fights, he didn't stick around for round 3. But that didn't mean the war was over. After many small battles in 1608, the Yaqui and over 2,000 indigenous allies, mostly Mayo, joined forces and ended up being victorious in 2 separate large-scale battles against the Spanish, securing their powerful reputation. In 1610, they signed a peace treaty agreeing to relinquish part of their land in exchange for a guarantee, signed by the King of Spain, acknowledging their ownership of their remaining territory in southern Sonora. At the time, they numbered between 100 and 200,000 people. In 1617, the Yaqui invited the Jesuit missionaries to stay with them and teach them their ways. They lived in a mutually advantageous relationship with the Jesuits for over 120 years, and while they did mostly convert to Christianity, they also kept a large portion of their traditional beliefs and practices. The Yaqui religion is a syncretic religion of old Yaqui beliefs and practices and the Christian teachings of Jesuit missionaries. It's also considered the earliest revitalization reform movement within Native American religions. The Jesuits also introduced the Yaqui to wheat, cattle, and horses. Using their intimate knowledge of the Sonoran desert landscape, the Yaqui traditionally farmed the Three Sisters crops of corn, beans, and squash, as well as cotton. At this time, the Yaqui were prospering, and so they allowed the missionaries to extend their activities further north. By the 1730s, Spanish settlers and miners were getting closer and had begun encroaching on Yaqui land. At the same time, the Spanish colonial government started making sly changes to the arm's-length relationship. Understandably upset about this, the Yaqui and Mayo revolted in 1740, and the outcome was brutal. The 1740 revolt resulted in the deaths of 1,000 Spaniards and 5,000 Native Americans, and the animosity lingered. Instantly, the Jesuit missionaries became nervous and began to leave, and the Yaqui prosperity of the earlier years went with them. By 1767, the Jesuits had left Mexico entirely, and the Franciscan priests who replaced them never gained the confidence of the Yaqui. An uneasy peace between the Spaniards and the Yaqui endured for many years after the revolt. But then, in 1821, everything changed again. The Spanish were defeated after the 11-year Mexican War of Independence, but to the Yaqui, this didn't mean much. They still considered themselves independent and self-governing. So when the New Mexican government came after them for taxes, they refused, and once again, things got messy. In 1825, Yaqui leader Juan Banderas led a revolt with hopes of uniting the Mayo, Opata, Pima, and Yaqui into a state that would be independent of Mexico. Together, the tribes fought tirelessly, and after more bloodshed, they successfully drove the Mexicans out of their territories. Their celebrations were short-lived. The Yaqui leader was eventually defeated and executed in 1833. However, this only fueled the fire, and a succession of revolts continued as the Yaqui resisted all control from the Mexican government. The war featured a number of awful brutalities by Mexican authorities, including a massacre in 1868 in which the army burned 150 Yaqui to death inside a church. This went on for the full rule of the next Yaqui leader known as Cajeme, until he was executed in 1887. At that point, the Mexican government changed their policies and started confiscating Yaqui lands, displacing hundreds. Some of them fled to the mountains where they joined guerrilla campaigns against the Mexican army. Then in 1876, Mexican dictator Porfirio Diaz entered the picture, and things went from bad to worse. Under Diaz's rule, the Mexican government didn't just confiscate the Yaqui land, they brutalized and harassed the Yaqui people. Thousands of Yaqui were taken as hostages and then sold as slaves to sugarcane and tobacco plantations. Mexican soldiers were hunting down Yaqui like vermin, especially when there was a $100 prize for the ears of a Yaqui gorilla. President Diaz ordered thousands of Yaqui, including women and children, to be shipped to San Blas, where they were forced to walk more than 200 miles to San Marcos. The walk took several weeks, in which many women and young children didn't survive. Their bodies were left by the side of the road to become food for the wildlife, and those who survived the walk wished they hadn't. Survivors were sold to plantations as slaves, where they lived the days working physical labor in the brutal heat from dusk until dawn. They were given little food and were beaten if they didn't meet their nearly impossible quotas. They spent their nights locked up, alone and cold. Most Yaqui who were sent to plantations died there, with 2/3 of them dying within the first year. Yaqui women were forced to choose husbands from among the male Chinese slaves. If they refused, one was chosen for them. Those who resisted were severely beaten. This crossbreeding was an attempt by the Mexican authorities to finally rid themselves of the Yaqui people for good. While this was happening, the Yaqui resistance continued. Some fled to Arizona, where they worked to earn money to buy firearms and ammunition, to assist the rebels who were still fighting the Mexican government. The last major battle between the Mexican army and the Yaqui occurred in 1927 and was fought at Cerro del Gallo Mountain. Unfortunately, the Mexican army's heavy artillery and planes made it impossible for the Yaqui to prevail. In 1937, General Lázaro Cárdenas, who had previously defeated the Yaqui in 1917, was now the president of the republic and was making some big changes. He decided to reserve 500,000 hectares of ancestral lands on the north bank of the Yaqui River for the tribe to once again call home. He also ordered the construction of a dam to provide irrigation water to the Yaqui and gave them advanced agricultural equipment and water pumps. After centuries of horrific battle, the Yaqui were able to maintain a degree of independence from Mexican rule. And finally, they were able to pick up the pieces of all that they had lost. In 1939, the Yaqui reportedly produced 3,500 tons of wheat, 500 tons of maize, and 750 tons of beans. Whereas only a few years earlier, in 1935, they had produced only 250 tons of wheat and no maize or beans. The Yaqui were slowly getting their lives back. The Sonoran Desert is the hottest desert in Mexico. This means that the Yaqui greatly depend on the river for their survival. But after decades of war, they now find themselves having to fight for water rights. Water is being unlawfully redirected to other areas. Droughts and dams have caused a large portion of the river to dry up, posing a serious threat to the Yaqui culture. Aside from no longer having water for drinking and agriculture, the lack of available water has also led to a drastic decline in plant and tree species. Now the Yaqui have to buy water that's not only imported in plastic containers, it's rationed, given reservations. Some of these reservations were set up in Arizona. Far from their hide from a drastic change to their natural resources, nearly all of the Yaquis' traditional villages were burned down and looted. And now, decades later, they're living in a whole new world. Because their ancestral villages no longer existed, the Yaqui were given reservations. Some of these reservations were set up in Arizona, far from their homeland and far from traditional life. Their traditional adobe huts were replaced by concrete structures. Their colorful embroidered skirts were replaced with jeans. Suddenly, there was no need to make their own possessions. Everything was created in the factories of the modern world. They were told this would make their lives easier. The Yaqui today remain independent, not just from the Mexican government, but as individuals themselves. While some Yaqui choose to live on the modern reservations of Arizona, many have chosen to live traditionally in Mexico, bringing back as much of their historical culture as possible and emphasizing the independence they fought so hard for. Today, there are 8 Yaqui villages in Sonora, and while their traditional lifestyle may be different, the Yaqui continue to dabble in their traditional arts and crafts, something their culture is particularly famous for. The Yaqui are noteworthy in their struggle to preserve their autonomy and traditions. They are known for having waged the most determined, enduring, and successful resistance against involuntary absorption into the dominant culture of the Spanish Catholic and Mexican society. In fact, they are the only Native American tribe that has never officially surrendered to either the Spanish colonial forces, the Mexican government, or the United States. Thanks for watching History Exposé. If you love uncovering the best stories in history, hit like and subscribe to keep exploring with us. Don't forget to visit our main page, Factinate, for more incredible facts about everything.